I'd like to start the broadcast today by going over some of the headlines in the news. One of the first questions I want to ask is, why is ISIS so intent on destroying the Egyptian pyramids and other artifacts for that matter as well? And I want to pose the question, could this possibly be a battle between the Enkyites and Enlilites coming to a crescendo, with opposing clans attacking each other's edifices? And with that said, let's go look at what's in the news from Press TV today. I'm going to back this up just a little bit and make it big so you can see it. But she describes not only what's going on with ISIS, and they call it Daesh now, but some of the other structures as well. And I want you to really pay attention to the one where she talks about Nabu. So let's play this video and check it out.
The United Nations has confirmed the destruction of the ancient Nabu temple in Iraq after Daesh terrorists claimed to have razed it to the ground. The UN Training and Research Agency made the announcement after comparing the temple's latest satellite images with those collected in January. Daesh has released a video claiming to have blown up the 2,800-year-old temple. Terrorists also threatened to destroy the Egyptian pyramids. Daesh-affiliated groups are currently active in Egypt's Sinai Peninsula. ISIL has demolished a number of archaeological sites and museums in Iraq and Syria since it seized parts of the two countries in 2014.
Okay, so you saw the destruction going on and the kind of things that are happening. So I want you to consider this question as you're seeing this historical artifacts from the Sumerians and their offspring being blown to smithereens. Now, if I recall correctly, Nabu was the source of the name for Nebuchadnezzar, who was the last king of Babylon that Saddam Hussein believed he was the reincarnated avatar of. So that's kind of strange. You have to consider that. And also that Nabu was most likely, I'll have to look at my table, but I'm pretty sure he was the son of Marduk. And so anything to do with Marduk or Isis or any of the other Anunnaki council members that were in Enlil's territory are really getting the business right now. So watch for that and you'll see that. And I wanted you to see it through that filter. The next topic I wanted to talk about, because they were talking about blowing up Egypt, and this is not the first time that it's come up, that ISIS and Daesh now, whatever label they want to give them, these barbarians, they want to blow up the Egyptian edifices, in particular the Giza complex. And you know, this is not the first time they've stated this. It came out earlier in the news that they were talking about wanting to do this. And you have to ask yourself, well, why is that so threatening to the higher-ups of the religion of Islam? And I think this next one might answer the question for you. So let's pose this question. If, according to Thoth, he built the pyramids as stated in the Emerald Tablets, and he bore down into the Halls of Amenti so he could have access to it there, and they're accessible from that location, does it make more sense that the underground facilities are being targeted just like what's going on with satellite warfare? Because you realize there's an entire underground complex underneath the Giza pyramid and the Sphinx, according to Thoth. So he states that also when he's in his stasis state right here, in the Halls of Amenti, he's able to do particular missions on Earth, and I'll show that to you in a minute. So he could be directly targeted while he's in the stasis state before he returns at the end of the age, just like he said he would. So where have we heard that? The coming of the new age and this new ruler who's going to establish a kingdom for 1,000 years? Well, it says exactly that in the Emerald Tablets if you go read it. So you go, wow, isn't that what was supposed to happen with Jesus? And you'll start to see the parallels that I've been pointing out to people for some time. Okay, so the next question would be, who would issue such an order to go back and destroy edifices from these warring clans? battling over the access to knowledge and the evolution of consciousness. Well, we kind of know who that was back in the Garden of Eden in the Atrahasis. This was the very being that was attacking Thoth, and as he was vying for followers between Jehovah and Azazel in my second book that I pointed out. I won't bring that up as a reference here, but I want you to recall. So these two are opposed to each other, and the focal point is the battle over the access to human consciousness, especially higher human consciousness that they know we're capable of having. Okay, so recall also from the Emerald Tablets that Enki, and this is about 50,000 years ago according to tablets, the dweller of Atlantis, right about the time Atlantis is being destroyed, he sends his son Thoth to Egypt, or the land of Chem, to establish a civilization so that they can have access to the ancient teachings, these access to higher consciousness parameters that were being taught on Atlantis that Enki still wanted to see taught to the humans, so he sent Thoth to do this. If you read it, that's exactly what it says. And that coincides with the mission he was given by Anu when he came back to Earth in the Adapa tale as well. So you've got a couple of corroborating pieces of evidence. So, and raising human consciousness was the goal of Thoth's mystery schools just down in Egypt. And being a good engineer, knowing that you all expect me to back up what I'm saying, I'll go give you a couple of the excerpts out of my second book, The Seventh Planet Mercury Rising. And on page 141, it starts talking about some of the things that Thoth said about Egypt and these particular structures, and it might give you some background here. For some 16,000 years, he ruled the ancient race of Egypt from approximately 52,000 BC to 36,000 BC. During that time, the ancient barbarous race among which he and his followers had settled had been raised to a high degree of civilization. This is the land of Egypt that he's talking about. So it's pretty simple. If you take 16,000 years off of, I just used 50,000 years. I'm not sure why I put 52,000 years here. If you subtract that off how long he was there, he says right after he'd ruled for this long, he then goes on to the next excerpt here, on page 166 and 167 from the same book. Raised I high over the entrance a doorway, a gateway leading down to Amenti. These are the Halls of Amenti. Few there would be with courage to dare it, few past the portal to dark Amenti. Raised over the passage, I, a mighty pyramid, using the power that overcomes Earth's gravity force. Okay, so then I'm going to skip down just a little bit farther where he gives you, and it says it in his own words, okay, that another place that he built the Giza pyramid. Builded I the great pyramid, patterned after pattern of earth force. That's the Merkaba, dodecahedron field that Drunvalo talks about. Burning eternally so that it too might remain through the ages. In it I builded my knowledge of magic science, so that I might be here when again I return from Amenti. I, while I sleep in the halls of Amenti, my soul roaming free, will incarnate, dwell among men in this form or another, Hermes thrice born. So, the idea of Thoth being an avatar and could be out in multiple bodies at the same time fighting this light-dark mission ought to help you understand what's going on here. And that may have a lot to do with why he's been demonized so significantly through history. So, this next picture I want to show you, I got to move this out of the way a little bit here for you, is a non-equivalent zodiacal house model that I put together by hand using the actual transit times in years. Here you can see the 3 different transit times. Okay, but now this is different than a equivalent house zodiacal model that takes each one of these 30-degree segments and splits it up and gives it 2,160 years. So every one gets 30 degrees and it's just equivalent. Every single one's the same. Whereas you can see in this one, we have a time frame of 1986.37, 2129.04, and 2291.28 years. Those are actual transit times that you can see are put in these different houses. So each one's different. And I think this had a lot to do with the bickering that went on along the Anunnaki. If the last person who had the House of Pisces was squabbling about, hey, I only got 1986 years of rule. I didn't get my full 2160. You can see the kind of consternation that would bring up if somebody said, well, you know, let's play with these models And which one are we going to use when we decide it's your turn to rule, So you could see where it could get ugly. What I wanted to bring out, though, on this particular one, and I'm going to go read to the text and come back to it. I created this image to show the non-equivalent model. The House of Leo, in particular, is what I was focused on, okay? And I got to back up and say that many researchers, including Robert Schoch, believe that the pyramid is definitely older than the 3,100 years ago, and it was not attributable to Cheops, as was stated. He didn't really build it. That it was much older, and they used water erosion and things around the Sphinx to try to take it back further in time. And it'll actually, you can see, if you go back to 10,853, I might have to blow this up for you guys to see it. Okay, let's go up here so you can see it. Oop, that was kind of big. Okay, so here's the House of Leo again. And you can see, if you rewound the zodiac just one time, like they were trying to do, and they got the archaeoastronomy to back it up. But guess what? If you back it up another zodiacal wheel, the archaeoastronomy will line up again. So that's not definitive to me. But you can see it's 10,853 to 8,723 was the age of Leo back, if you just rewound this zodiacal house, or the zodiacal wheel once. And here's the reference point to start is 26 AD in the house of Pisces. See right here? So it goes this way, like that. And you can just wrap it all the way around until you end up at these outer numbers that we're going to talk about in the second time around. So I rewound it twice using this non-equivalence zodiacal house model. And it pegs the age of Leo at 36,479 to 34,350 years ago. Now, I want you to notice that this date, or this time frame that's elapsed, coincides with the assertion in the Emerald Tablets having, if Thoth ruled for 16,000 years, like he said, before building the Halls of Amenti, and then capping it off with the Giza and the Sphinx, like he said in his text, then you just subtract 16 from about 50 and you get about 34,000. So it goes for anywhere, if you do yours 52,000 and you subtract 16, you'll start out at 32,000. Okay, so it's 32 to 34,000. Well, that falls right inside this zodiacal house, just like I said. So here's the House of Leo, the lion body of the Sphinx. So it all made sense to me. And he also said, by the way, that the face on the Sphinx was his in several writings. So it's interesting that it's been changed around, beard taken off, beard put on, head reshaped based on the geometrical disparity between the size of the Sphinx's head and its actual body. It looks like it's been whittled on some. Okay, so who knows whose face is up there now, but the original face was Thoth, according to him. Okay, so I thought that was very interesting, and it kind of takes you back more in connection with understanding what happened at Atlantis and his whole story relative to when these artifacts were built. So I put my stake in the ground, contrary to what Robert Schoch has said, and I believe he actually was being very conservative, and he said as much in some of his interviews. He was the academic with the credentials to readjust this date against the Egyptian authorities of archaeological antiquities and take it backwards in time toward 10,000, which, is, you can see, does line up here within this frame, okay? But also he believed it was at least more than 17,000 years old because of other evidence that he had, but he couldn't really put that out there. And he stated that he had to be conservative in order to at least get this far. Well, I'm not being conservative. I'm trying to be accurate with what the guy said. The builder of the edifice, what he said, and it does fall within this house, just like he said. So I thought that was very interesting. Okay. So hopefully people will remember that whenever they see that I believe it was built in the house of Leo 36,000 years ago, approximately. That's my work, and it didn't come from anyone else except from Thoth. Okay, I didn't make it up. Okay, let's go look at something else in the headlines that I think everybody has taken note of and thought, what in the world is going on with this? So you know, in Syria and Iraq and the whole area, all the ancient artifacts, edifices, buildings, museums have been pretty much ransacked by this barbarous clan that's been funded by the United States and Israel and the Gulf nations that are trying to get their pipeline through Syria so they can go be the ones to sell their oil to Europe. What a greedy bunch. Anyway, I titled this Palmyra Arches, Moloch Bohemian Grove, and Marduk. Ooh. So I always try to do the news and keep track of what these Anunnaki players are doing and see how they're playing with the primitive workers on this planet. Whether it's to teach them a lesson, then I try to figure out what the lesson is, if that's what's going on. Well, the problem, reaction, solution scenario that occurred in Syria recently is very telling about who the Anunnaki players are involved in the destruction of yet another ancient site. This victory arch at the city of Palmyra, which is, I guess it's a UNESCO site, it's very famous, brought the world's attention to the destruction of these old artifacts, even though it's been going on for a while, starting way back when they invaded the museum in Baghdad and stole all the Sumerian artifacts out of the thing in 1993. So this is not new, what's been going on. But as you saw from the video from Press TV, they're looking to up their game and go beyond Syria and implement these same kind of destructive history rewriting techniques in Egypt as well. That's why I went and showed you the situation with Thoth's pyramid, and probably because he said he'd be returning out of his stasis state at the end of the age. Well, we just reached the end of the age of Pisces. I think he viewed that one as the dark age in his writings. So he goes, until the age of darkness is past. When that's past, then he's allowed to do what he's supposed to do. So you can see how tied they are to the zodiac. Okay. Well, I wanted to remind you that the Victory Arch in Palmyra was dedicated to Bel, which was another name for Marduk. Okay, so remember, Marduk ended up in Babylon, even though the territory was allocated to Enlil. So he was one of the only Enkyites still up in Enlil's territory that led to wars. And here, some Victory Arch triumph that was built to him, probably having to do with one of his battles against the Enlilites as they were trying to take over the vicinity, because that's where the Bond Heaven Earth facilities were that were communicating and transporting ore and other required goods back and forth to Nibiru. So, let's go take a look at this article by Michael Snyder, if I can find it on here. It's quite interesting. Well, we don't have to look at it. I'll give you the link, and let's just do the excerpt from it so we don't get too lost in text. Bel became especially used, the name Bel became especially used of the Babylonian god Marduk. And when found in the Syrian and Neo-Babylonian personal names or mentioned in inscriptions in a Mesopotamian context, it can usually be taken as referring to Marduk and no other god. Similarly, Belit, without some disambiguation, mostly refers to Bel-Marduk's spouse, Sarpanit. However, Marduk's mother, the Sumerian goddess Ninmah, or Ninhartsog, and she was used other names in the Sumerian, was often known, and she shows up in the Atrahasis as Belit Ili, the lady or mother of the gods, as it's stated in Akkadian. So, all of a sudden you see some ancient site that the news media decides to focus on, replicates an arch from this site, and then says they're going to put 1,000 of them around the world, and they started in Europe first, and New York. You go, what is going on here? Is this like a time portal? What is this? Why pick that when you've had all these other places destroyed, including areas in Mosul, in Nineveh, and now Nabu's city? Why aren't they focused on any of those? So why this particular one? It's because somebody's got an agenda, and they want the affiliation of this monument with that particular being, and that being is Marduk. Okay, so that ought to make your head spin a little bit and realize, why is an Enkyite having an edifice put up around the world? In particular, they started in New York and in I believe it was Paris, where they put it in front of your museum. So, or England, I can't remember which one it was. I'll have to go look. But I saw this, and then of course, the news was there, and they made a big deal out of it, and talked about how great it is to be saving some ancient artifact, and blah blah blah. Oh, well, that's a ruse, okay? This is a being making a statement about their authority in particular geographies. And as I mentioned to you, I believe Enlil and probably his son Ninurta are in the United States running the show, using the most powerful military in the world to have their way with bullying and getting what they want, while it looks like Marduk is in Europe He just said so with his arch, his victory arch, and he's running the European Union as part of the conglomeration of regions into a new world order in cooperation with Endel. That's what I think is truly going on. So, so that ought to tell you why the media chose to focus on that one. Who told them to do that? Okay, think about the high-level control of the media and who's doing that. Well, these Anunnaki are telling these media holders what to say and what not to say at the very highest level of editorial oversight. And if you question that, go look at Moloch, this owl figure that's the focus of the cremation of care ceremony in Bohemian Grove. Moloch was none other than Bel, okay? This is Marduk. It's kind of interesting. It sounds kind of like Marduk. Marduk. Okay, but if it is Marduk, then given the fact he renamed the planet Nibiru after himself in the Enuma Elish, okay, when he was the chief deity of Babylon, had this read every spring, and the Lucifer scope, which is located in the northern hemisphere in Tucson, where Nibiru would be seen coming out of perihelion. Okay, remember it comes out below from the south through Libra more than likely, comes up around the sun, out of the backside of it at an angle, so it's very hard to see on the ecliptic. But once it comes around the sun in the northern hemisphere, if you look at the sun setting in the west, Nibiru should be to the right of it. And actually, that's what we're seeing, and I'm going to show you some of that, okay? So, if that's the case, and Marduk renamed Nibiru after himself, and there's a scope, an infrared scope, named Lucifer in Tucson, in the northern hemisphere, it's got to be looking for Nibiru coming out of perihelion, okay? So keep that in mind. There's no other reason, and the timing of when it was put there would indicate that that's what they've done, okay? So, I've come to an interim conclusion that the head of the Illuminati, representing the plans for a new world order, is none other than Marduk, Lucifer. And he's taken on all the symbols of his brother, Ningshita, and smeared the crap out of him with Baphomet, being part of the Satanic Church, and everything else. The Caduceus belong to Enki and Ningshita. The fact that it shows up anywhere ought to be very suspicious to anyone, how it's being used. Look, it showed up in the medical industry, and look how well our medical industry is being run. Okay, so it's being smeared there as well. So I believe this particular instance of having the scope named, having the planet coming in that's been renamed by Marduk, this directly points to him, okay? And it corroborates what happened in the Isaiah 14, I believe it's 12, sole reference to Lucifer in the Bible. And this was the story where this son of the morning star, if you will, which was Venus. Now you realize that Venus was none other than Ninmah, and I just showed you that Enki's son, Marduk, was born of him and his half-sister Ninmah. Okay? So that so all of a sudden, you see this son of Venus, Marduk, is being affiliated with the fallen king of Babylon in the Isaiah 14 reference, Nebuchadnezzar. Okay, well, Nabu, you just saw his city destroyed there by Daesh, ISIS. He was the offspring of the Enkyites, in particular Marduk. So now it should make sense to you why that's happening. Okay, so what I'm telling you, just to be very clear, the reason a Latin Vulgate term, a light bearer, showed up in the Bible was because Enlil was smearing any Enkiite who was in his territory and their offspring. Okay? And that's what he's saying there. So all of a sudden now you realize, I truly believe the person that was in his territory that he's smearing is none other than Marduk and his offspring. So he affiliates a light bearer. Now this is really interesting. Lucifer's term means light bearer. It's not a name. Okay? So the Lucifer, I believe, that the Catholic Church is looking for, this light bearer, is none other than Marduk, looking with their IR telescope. Now think about this. The Nibiru complex is surrounded by a red iron oxide cloud, which envelops, in particular, Nibiru. And I guess it goes out for millions of miles away from the planet. Well, this would cast a demonic red glow, look like the head of it would light up before the trail of debris that it's pulling along, so it would look like a long snake with like a dragon with fire coming out of its mouth, because the front of it that approaches the sun at perihelion would get lit up first and much brighter. Now consider the red iron oxide cloud around it, and it's going to be red. It's going to be a red dragon, right? Where have we heard of this? Okay, the famed red dragon of the Chinese lore. Okay, and also in their astrology. So there are also clear links to the royal dragon court held initially in Babylon under Marduk, where he was the source of secret societies like the Masons. There was building projects in Babylon where people were brought there and taught how to be master builders. This is where the Masons started. As a matter of fact, in one of the stories of the Sumerian tablets, Lamech, who was the biblical Lamech, who's supposed to be the father of Noah, was married to another primitive worker named, and they call her various names. The one I use is Batanash. That's how I remember her. But they also call her Bilbanos, I believe. I've seen different names for her, but it's the same woman. It was his wife, okay? He was summoned to Babylon by some liaisons of Marduk, and while he was away there learning to build like a mason, that's when Enki had an encounter with Batanash in the medical officer's city of Shuruppak, where Noah was the king, and impregnated her and had the son Noah. And if you go read the book of Enoch about the birth account of Noah himself, that's where you see this crazy, whether it's exaggerating or true, but they describe the birth of Noah, and it was sheer fourth dimensional. Okay, not a normal child. That's what freaked Lamech out and made him go off and seek out Methuselah and ultimately Enoch to explain to him what was going on with this birth. So it's a really great read if nobody has had a chance to see that. Now, what I want to do just real quick here is kind of scroll down to a couple of videos that I'm getting a lot of pictures and videos from people from all around the world that are looking in the skies now because of what's going on. So I wanted to go to this particular one. This individual decided to do the finger test blocking the sunlight source so that he could see if there was something else behind the sun. So let's see if we can go pull that one up. I'll close the mic off so you can listen and hear what he has to say.
15. Here's the sunglasses I use. That's January the 13th of 2015. I use these sunglasses. Nothing special. Here's the sun without them. Just a mess. And when I put these on, of course now there's a cloud. Yeah, the cloud's moved in. Oh, there it is though. Okay. Now I'm gonna use your stupid little finger trick you guys talk about. If I can. I don't know if I can get my finger around here. That's right. Alright, how about that, assholes? There you go.
Stop that right there, and I wanted to say something about this real quick. This is definitely a step in the right direction to begin to verify what you're seeing. I would say that if you're going to use glasses like that, if you'll use a 3x5 index card instead of your finger, you get a nice flat edge. You can play with, like I said before, you can play with whether it's clear or see-through to see how much light you're letting through. But if you do that, make sure you go all the way outside every lens, whether it's the sunglasses or the camera, so that there's no possibility that the light hitting a lens when you're covering it from the inside would not be coming through the outside lens. You understand what I'm saying? So make sure you're on the furthest outside to cover the sun before you let it come through any filters. There was a really great video that came out of Brazil just recently. It looks like it was on 5/6/16, and somebody posted to Facebook that Krista sent me this morning, and I thought it was absolutely breathtaking. And I find it hard to believe that it could be really real, but maybe it is. So I'm going to bring this up for you so you guys can see it. I'm going to back up here to the beginning. There's no sound, so I'm going to go ahead and continue talking, and I'm going to make it big so you can see it.
Hoje a gente está com
So
dois
you can see the
tons.
shimmering of the sun on the water here. You can also see the light shining here on the water, whatever that body.
É dois, um atrás do outro, ó.
Okay, so that's kind of a telling thing. And then, of course, the intensity of it's not nearly as bright as this one, but you can see that it's there.
Top, hein?
Water's moving. It's, and it was taken at a place in Toscano, Brazil. And this is a high lake. It looks like a high plateau where they're looking across the lake at the sunset.
Hoje a gente está com dois
Very much in
tons
the
aqui,
middle
ó.
of the country, Brazil. But so you know it has to be sunset and setting to the west. So I looked at it. I thought, could this be possible? Could they have seen this? And I went on the map and looked at it, and it does look possible. And it's nice. There's no clouds. There's no obscurations. The camera's moving around, so you can see there's no lens flare following a different angle of the sun, and so on and so forth. He zooms in and out. I thought it was really great. So after looking at that, I thought, wow, that was kind of disturbing. So we did the math on Nibiru just recently, and it showed in the worst case that if it kept traveling at the rate it was in August 30th of 1990, and that was the 25,494 miles per hour, if it kept at that pace, which was a scalar rate of about 8, more than the average velocity, which was 3,170 miles per hour, then it would arrive absolutely no later than 2019. Well, and I said, of course, from 1990 as it gets closer, it's going to get faster, so it's probably going to be sooner than that. But I was creating a bracketing window and bringing it in closer so you could see that the numbers I'd done in my previous report were quite accurate. Well, one of the YouTube comments on that video really impressed me. I really applaud the individual who went through the math that I did and actually decided to look in 1981 to see if they couldn't get a better resolution on which month it was so that it could become more accurate. And he did this and took about 3 months off of the 9-year estimate that I had done from 1981 to 1981 to 1990, because it was in August of 1990, but we didn't know it exactly in 1981 approximately when they did this. So he played with this, and he came out with 2017 with just a little bit of leftover. Okay, so, and in my first report I said by the end of 2016, the best I can guess, not messing around with the scalars more than just using them as an integer, it landed us at the end of 2016. So the fact that he did that and we came out that close, I think is really a good refinement of the model, is what I'm saying. So I'm really happy that somebody took the time to do that. I know looking at math on YouTube is not very interesting, but guess what, people? Where we at right now is trying to figure out, a window of, so we know how much time we have to either do our bucket list or get right spiritually. Okay, so that's what we're doing, and I think it is all helpful to keep the model out there. I publicized everything so that anybody could go through it, and I really appreciate the subscriber that did that, and I'll look up your name and call you out. So thank you very much for doing that. I'm going to end the second episode of the Seventh Planet Broadcasting now, and I'll try to keep them short so we can do lots of them. Blessings to you all.